Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Artist Next Level podcast. We are here to have another conversation. My good friend Drew Harris and myself, we are super excited to chat today about the why. Why in the world, the why do we pick the mediums that we do as artists? You have, my friend, your own medium. Maybe you're an oil painter or an acrylic or a sculptor or a photographer or digital artist, whatever you are. You chose that for specific reasons, maybe related to what you want to say to your art, or maybe because it's material that you had accessible to for whatever reason. So today, Drew and I, we're going to dive in deeper into the why we have chosen the mediums that we have, for ourselves. And I think it's going to be a good conversation. I don't think I've ever talked about this before. So let's see where we go with it.
Resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Drew, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Well, thank you very much. Hey, I'm very well, my friend. And you? All good.
I have to
be good.
I am doing good. As you noticed last episode, I snuck in a quick episode solo.
Yeah, you did. Hey, wait a minute.
I know, right? Like, hey, I'm in the studio. I'm going to do a quick recording. Click record.
And it was so good, too. People must listen to that. It's a really good piece.
Thank you. Yeah. But I must admit, I enjoy doing the episodes with you because I feel like I'm talking to somebody, not no one. No one was in the room when I'm doing a solo episode. So it's always fun to have another person to dive deeper into specific topics. And today, let's talk about medium. Why did we selected what we selected? How did we get to choose what we have chosen as our medium? And why? So I think that's something that we should go. So let's get started.
Okay.
What is your preferred medium, Drew?
Well, I'm an acrylic painter. And, a lot of people know this, but, I didn't really study painting. I studied by watching. I studied by watching friends and colleagues and, artists that I respected there. I didn't study painting officially. Mm-hmm. I studied drawing and sculpture and design. So my early part of my career was design. But I was hiring illustrators to do illustrations for annual reports, that kind of thing. And I was always inspired by going to their studios because they had these really creative places. And they were generally working in acrylic to do these illustrations, whatever it was. And there was something magical about the artist's studio that was just kind of drew me in. And, I was also very good friends with dozens of acrylic artists. So seeing their studios, and I got excited. And the acrylics were really just starting at the time. Initially, I didn't like them. I felt they were too plastic. They were, the environmental concern. It was even back then in the late 70s and early 80s. We were saying, acrylic's plastic. Well, yes, it is, but it's a polymer. It's something interesting. I think they were going to develop it. And I was not interested in oils because of the stink and just the fact that it took forever to dry. I'm not the most patient guy in town. So I never got into painting with oils. But as I started into my acrylic career, that was, I think, also in line with when acrylics really developed. And, people, companies that were developing new mediums and new colors, they were really scientific. So now I started to say, well, that's an interesting medium. That's where I'm going to go. And so I've used acrylics since. And the acrylics, vary from, cheap to very high-end expensive. And there is a difference.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. For me, I started I think the first painting I ever did was an acrylic painting. It was in high school. That was the first time I touched acrylic painting through my art teacher, and I did like a little base. There was a blue base, and then after that, when I went to college, my first college class, we had to buy a little set of oil paints, a little set of acrylic paints, like the painting 101. So starting to compare the two. And since day one, there was something for me. This was 1990, 91, when I started working at college, with the material. That was the first time that, I'm like, well, I really like this. And I think just like you, I'm kind of impatient and I don't like waiting. So this idea of waiting for the medium to dry was like, oh. So, yeah. And, but I noticed too, like my friends who were doing, in art school, were doing oil painting. There was a finishing in oil painting that I really loved. There was a certain depth that when I started working with acrylic, I did not know how to achieve more, the depth that my friends were achieving with oil. But that actually kind of intrigued me more. Like how can I make, as you mentioned, a material that looks plasticky, that looks, almost too synthetic. How can we make it feel more like painting, to give it that depth? And that kind of challenged me to, I'm going to continue working with this and push the material and push it and try and test and see what I can go with it. So I started trying like different impastos to give it like volume and thickness and mediums, to test the just the consistency, the transparency of the painting, the medium. And that's when I really fell in love with acrylic. And since then, I think I've only done maybe a couple oil paintings, which I don't even remember what happened to them so long ago.
Yeah,
that I really became
just changed your mediums altogether.
Yeah, I really became an acrylic painter almost from day one. Where I haven't left it. Even when I did printmaking, so I went through a season of I did printmaking. I would still bring my acrylic paints and paint over my prints, or do prints. So there's something about a medium that I really, really like. And I think something that you and we have done is, we have taken the material and tried to do things with it that is up far above and beyond just take it out of the tube and put your brush and go right into the surface. So maybe let's talk a little bit about how our process is. I think for some of our friends, maybe quite interesting. What do you do with your medium? With your
I think one of the things that as a painter, as a new painter back in really the mid to late 80s, and then really seriously into the early 90s when I became sort of better known and doing more shows. The beauty of the acrylics was that I could create this patina that I couldn't do in oils because of the speed. The acrylics were amazing because I could put down a base, and then put something over it, another acrylic base. And then if I didn't like it, I could wipe it off to the degree of drying. And it could have been minutes where certain sections were dry and certain sections were wet. The moment I started peeling that off, those dry sections were staying and the wet sections were being pulled off, similar to what weather might do to a wall. And I'm going like, this is exactly what I envisioned, but I couldn't do that with an oil or in a watercolor. This is a medium that can, it can pull off itself, so when it's in layers, you can take that one layer off. If you're fast enough, you can get it back off. Yeah. And that was the beauty of this, is I could work fast. I could get results instantaneously. I could do a painting in 2 days rather than sitting around with alkyd paints and all of this, God forbid I was using some of the really, the house paints and the oil-based house paints and so forth. They were horrid to work with, and they stunk, and I just knew that I would probably be dead by the age of 30, if I kept using this stuff, because it was just, I was toxic. I wasn't taking care of myself. or my environment. So I switched over to acrylics, and that's when I met a number of good acrylic makers, and that's when I got really intrigued by it.
Well, and I remember when I saw your show in the 90s, that exhibition that I went to see, was it 99 or what is it? 99 in 2000?
99.
Yeah, that I saw in Chicago. First time I saw your work, and it really, something that attracted me to your work was the surface. There was a richness. Yeah, I could swear it was probably oil painting, if I'm honest, if I remember correctly. But, it was acrylic. You had achieved a certain depth, a certain liquidity to the surface that it was really luscious, really alive. And that really, attracted me.
And I think, you mentioned this before where one of the acrylics could give you one thing, but it couldn't finish it. It felt like it couldn't get that luminosity that an oil.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the word, right? Luminosity. Yeah.
And
the word was luminous. Yeah, it has light.
Well, and I'll tell you why. Because what I was doing was mixing mediums is not always the wisest idea. But in acrylics, because the acrylics couldn't give me that luminosity, and this is again back in the 90s. So we didn't have a lot of the overall, surface mediums, things that could create something new, matte or gloss or semi-gloss. So I had to create a surface by applying oils to it. And what I would do, I literally had one color that I would glaze over an entire acrylic painting, but I would rub it in with a cloth, which was a red. It was I can't remember even what the name of the red was, but it was kind of it was a burnt oxide red.
Okay.
And that could be rubbed into an acrylic surface. So if you had a white and you wanted to tone it down, all I would do is just put it on a rag. It was a little bit of liquid or an extender in oil, and then rub it into the surface. And all of a sudden you had now what was white is now slightly creamy.
Right.
And that gave me this luminous kind of an old world feel,
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the reason that these paintings worked.
They were beautiful. I mean, they were really amazing surface.
The base was done in acrylic. And again, you mentioned this whole idea of thickness, right? You can do that with an oil.
Right.
In some cases, in the oils, for example, you put a half an inch thick oil paint onto a canvas, and you're going to be waiting decades for it to dry. Literally. I mean, it can take literally decades for that oil to fully dry.
Yeah.
But in acrylics, you're looking at days, if not hours.
Yeah.
Where you can rework the surface so it hardens on the surface. You can do your finishing, and you have a painting dry in a couple of days.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. In my case, which is a very different way of applying the medium, what you like, that volume. Mine is almost the opposite. Mine is very, very thin. So just like you, I layered. I love to do a lot of layering.
Yes.
However, my layers are so thin that are like impossible to peel off or impossible to,
sure. Yeah.
Because they are almost, I treat a lot of my painting as almost as a watercolor, in that the acrylic medium has been so diluted so much that it takes many washes to build up the surface. But I love it because with every wash, there's mark making. So the final piece has like all this beautiful build-up of tons of layers, of these that as you get close, you will see red, green, blue, so many colors.
Would that have been sort of inspired by, similar to me, by looking at something like it, as an example, just for our listeners, that application in both of us in what we were doing is trying to replicate something with history. So take like an old wall.
Exactly.
An old wall that has been rained and snowed on.
Yeah.
Painted over and repainted and, sun-baked. That's what we're trying to do in multiple layers.
Yeah. yeah, the richness of the history of a surface, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I remember like when we moved to the JBR Center, that building looked like it had been repainted 10 times before we moved in. So,
Yeah.
one wall had scratches that were red, green, other side has scratches that were, pink and blue. So, and you could see the history of that, right? So I think so. Yeah, I think definitely there's a certain aesthetic of that one tries to emulate, and I think it's just because makes the object feel more rich than if it's perfectly painted blue.
Yes, that's true.
And
And you do a lot of drawing
yeah,
into your work, which can be then, covered over areas of your drawing can be covered over the very thin acrylic.
mm-hmm.
Watercolor can't do that
Right.
way. Oils might just, eradicate the drawing altogether. Whereas I think the acrylics are allowed, there is a transparency to them that allows you to use those two mediums to work together to tell that story.
Right.
About a drawing, there's a hint of a drawing.
Yeah, and it's something that I have done, like as a technique that I use quite a bit. Some of our friends might want to try. Like I would do a drawing on paper, and once the drawing was finished, use fixative, like get it really, really fixed, and then I would buy a bucket of gel medium, the thick one, and then I would take a dry brush and then just apply it over the surface of that drawing without having to smear it too much. Just like
Would it smear it?
Not if it's fixed properly. So really fixed where like if you put a finger across, it won't come off. That goes. I had to spray a lot of times, and then let it dry, and so that would seal the charcoal drawing completely, where it was like a painting.
Well, it's under a skin of that.
Exactly. And then I would apply the color over that. And some of my best paintings, I think, that I've done over the last 20 years, kind of have that technique of using parts of a drawing that are hidden underneath, and then you got the acrylic paint over that gel medium that encapsulates the charcoal drawing.
And I think that that's the beauty of your work, is that there's a story or multiple stories being told. We are visual storytellers,
Yeah.
That surface is important to be able to elicit feelings on a multiple level, right? So someone stands in front of your work, they might see 6 layers in,
right?
Something that's interesting to them.
Exactly.
Whereas another individual might see what's on the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's I love the medium now.
Yeah.
And, I don't discount some of the cheap stuff either, too. Mediums, right? The poster paints out there, which essentially are acrylics with a lot more chalk.
Yeah.
They're made in nefarious ways, I'm certain, particularly in this part of the world. However, some of them are pretty cool because not only are they cheap, they're really good as base painting.
Yeah.
If you really need a paint, you are going to seal it anyway. And you are going to, if you need to work fast and work large, you can work with a cheaper, not particularly good brand. I'm not going to mention any brands, of course, but you can put your base down. And if you're working really massive, big painting, it's just more economical. And then you can go in with those really good paints. And we know who we're talking about. And then, go in and do your final touches.
Yeah. And some of those cheap paintings, sometimes they come up with like this, like neon green, neon yellow colors.
Like unbelievable.
Like poster paint.
Yeah. And I tell you, well, I use one of these cheap paints for one particular color, and that's their black. I don't know, no other acrylic company has achieved black that this cheap company has done. And it's like, I bought buckets of it.
Oh, really?
I knew, of course, I'd be using a lot of black. I like black.
Yeah.
This black is like, it's like an Anish Kapoor black, that
I was going to ask you.
But it's not bad. That it's just, it's as black as you can get. And I'm thinking, wow, for a cheap, locally made paint, or is considered a poster or let's say mural paint, this product is amazing. And so I never discount the cheap brands. I don't have to go and spend, hundreds of dollars on something that is the high-end level.
Right.
If you can mix the two, you're better off.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about, also the importance, as we have many artists who listen to, many who maybe also new to painting, as well as we have many who have been doing it for a long time. But, the benefits of mixing colors and the richness that you get when you mix. Because today we have, this easy way of just go to the store to get every color you need, just take it out of the tube, squeeze it out, and the right goes into the surface. But that's what makes your black look plastic, your white look plastic, your red look poster red, but like really encouraging artists to mix the colors and the richness that you get by mixing, it's unparalleled. And that's sometimes where you see the difference between a seasoned artist versus a beginner one, right? Where you say, okay, that just came out of the tube, versus understanding the mixtures and the variety of color tones that you can get when you mix your color.
Well, you hit it right there. It was sort of the mastery of and knowledge of knowing how to blend as a painter. New painters, people that are unfamiliar with the mediums or don't have a long history with it, tend to, like you say, go into the store and buy your burnt umber and just use burnt umber. And when you look at the painting, that's come right from a tube. But I think a lot of the acrylics for a couple of decades probably, and I would say a decade at least, in the early years, you couldn't replicate an oil painting. Even when you mixed your your acrylics, you couldn't get the same tonal values. If you look at people like, any Rembrandts, the big Rembrandts or the big, the Renaissance painters, there was a luminance that they had because it was pure pigment, and they were just mixing, pure pigments, powder pigments, natural ingredients to do these paints. Whereas acrylic it's a plastic polymer base, product. The problem was that it always ended up looking muddy. Everything just goes dull down. How many times have you looked at a tube of red acrylic paint? I'm saying this for the cheaper brands, earlier years. You take that red paint that looked fantastic while it was wet, and you put it on your painting, and then you came back and it was like blood red, if not worse.
It looked all doggy, yeah.
Yeah, and you're going, wait a minute, that's not the color I put on there.
Right.
And there was no way to fix it unless you repainted it.
Repaint it, yeah.
So this is the problems with acrylic, because it's water and it dries, and now you're left with the base acrylic. And it doesn't, the water is what made it luminous. Yeah. And this is the difficulty with acrylics, I find, is that knowing that I'm going to get that product when it goes on my canvas, and it's going to stay the color. Right. And I think that is one of the major factors that acrylic manufacturers today are addressing. That the population out there that are using it are fed up with the fact that the paint looks fantastic in a tube, and on your fingertip when you take it off, you go, that's the color I want. And you apply it, but once the water's gone and the hydration is gone, it becomes this dull color. So I think manufacturers now are putting a real science into it, and we're going to be talking about that in another podcast with an expert. So I think, but now I think the oils and acrylics are on par.
And I think
equal.
And now we have more additives that could be added to the paint. We have now more mediums, which it seems like every time I go to the art store, there's like a new one that I haven't tried. Like, oh, I wonder what that does. There's pearlescent, there is iridescent, there is all kinds, glossy matte, high gloss.
I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but there's also the other side of the coin, which I always like to bring into a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the environmental issues.
Yeah.
With paints, right? Any paints, house paints, oil paints, solvent-based, whatever. And now with the acrylics are, you can buy, 30-liter pails of this stuff, right? If it doesn't go on your canvas, where does it go? Right. If it's in brushes and you're washing them out, this is always an issue. And I think the acrylic companies now are starting to address that as well. In our conversation with another individual that we will be talking to, that will be addressed. That whole concept of zero waste going into the water.
Yeah.
And there are tricks now that are an awful lot easier than oils to remove your paint, keep it in, and reuse it. Reuse it as sludge or use it as something on your canvas. You can repurpose all your old paints instead of flushing them down a sink. And I think there are the new artists today, a lot of us are concerned about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think the environmental implications nowadays of anything that we use, from food, from paint, materials, from clothing, from everything, in a world that everything is kind of like disposable, it seems like
it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just disappearing.
Yeah. It seems like it's just so easy to buy something. Everything that you buy comes in a plastic bag or in a plastic case, in a plastic something, right? That plastic has to go discarded somewhere, and not everywhere you'll find also recyclable centers and things of that nature. So
well, we as artists are facing this in a grander, almost we don't notice our plastic in our paint. We don't, we know it's plastic, we know it's a polymer medium, but we use it as a product that is of value. There's some value to it, right? So when we discard it, or we throw out our tins or tubes of acrylic, there is a double hazard there. You've got the paints and you've got the plastic.
So
you've got a double hazard, and that I think is going to be a big thing we will be talking about many times over. But back to the good things about the product, the mediums market now is huge, and walk into any art supply store, particularly in the U.S. I remember, like Dick Blick and all of these companies, right? They're the amazing products, the rows and rows and rows of acrylic paint. Fantastic.
Yeah.
No,
that's good. Exactly. So we talk about quite a bit about paint itself, and as you said, next week we're gonna have a great guest also coming with us to help us also answer some good old questions about acrylic painting, and it's gonna be great. She's an expert. She has written books about the subject, so it's gonna be great. So my friends, don't miss that episode. It's coming up next. It's gonna be good. But let's talk about also surface, because I think it's important, right? So one thing is the medium that we use to make the image, but the surface that holds that material. Why do we choose? That's a question that I've been asked many times. Like, Sergio, why do you do it on paper? Why don't you just go directly on the canvas, right? And I wish I had like a really profound answer to that. Other than I love paper, and I love the touch, the feel when I rub against the paper. There's I don't know. There's something there that when I touch the canvas, I get that texture that I don't like.
Yeah. Well, it is essential. We're using all our senses, right?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
are as a painter. So tell us more about your process and how you use it, because the paper is fascinating to me.
Yeah. So
you use two mediums.
Right. So my process is I paint, and this is not everything, but 95% of what I do is on paper. So the paper is gesso,
Yeah.
and after it's gesso, then the acrylic paint, of course, goes on top. But on the reverse, on the back side of the paper, that is adhered to canvas, gesso canvas also, and adhere with acrylic gel medium, which gives me a really nice surface that is flat, that I can roll up, and when it needs to be on display, it goes back flat really nicely. Unlike, paper that has memory, is really hard to unroll it with, it always, the memory will want to curl again. So I found that the canvas just makes it so relaxed, so flat again. And I only do it for larger pieces. I don't like small pieces that matter. For the smaller pieces, I use pre-stretched canvas, where then the paper is adhered to it on stretches. But this is for larger pieces. So my work, which a typical size painting of mine is the size of a person, 42 by 72, like a door.
A door.
Yeah, like a door. That size, I love this way of working. Yeah, because it's just nice flat, and I leave a 2-inch wide border all around, for framing or hanging, and why not? So, but
that's a 2-inch on the canvas. Not
what's
on
that?
paper.
It's on both. It's on both.
On both.
Yeah.
Okay. So you tape off your canvas or your paper as you're working, or
no? I paint, and then afterwards, then I painted the 2-inch wide all around.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
yeah, well, that's kind of interesting. So because there's a lot of ways of achieving that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I tend to tape it off.
Yeah.
But working with paper, unless it's a very good, cold press rag paper, something, or a hot press, I think is what it's called. You're going to tear the paper.
Yeah, or it can leave some adhesiveness on the surface.
That's true. Yeah.
And sometimes, because I use so much water or medium,
and it also gets under the.
Yeah. So I figured I just draw a pencil line on my 2-inch, so visually I can know where it's gonna be. Yeah. And I don't think of it too much. I just paint, and then at the end, it's just kind of what for somebody it might be the framing part of it. For me, it's like the reframing it with a white border or around. Yeah, and it kind of adds another layer of protection to the whole edge of the painting.
Yeah, I like the way you do this, and I'm intrigued. I'm just currently trying some tests myself, and I'm a bit scared to work, that scale, the scale that I like to work. Yeah, with the paper, I've got some wonderful paper, but I'm really nervous about putting it down on canvas. In fact, I'm on a roller, so I can do this as you've instructed us to do. Yeah, the process of getting these two elements together, or here, or what is welded,
And the secret is in the drying process, right? Making sure that you are in control of the drying process.
Yeah.
One of my earliest mistakes is like I thought it was dry. I left the room, and then when I came back 2 hours later, everything was wrinkled. Yeah, but the wrinkle, simply the paper shrunk faster than the canvas.
I see. Yeah. So how do you get around that?
So I usually put something on TV, and I'm watching while I'm rolling left and right and left and right and left and right. If I see a bubble starting to form in one spot, rubber, still wet. The glue is still wet. And if it's done properly, it's perfectly flat, perfectly fine.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, I just think it was something as you're talking, and this may be just a wild guess. Have you ever thought of ironing? I was just thinking if you standing watching TV rolling, I was thinking, maybe you could take it like an iron. Have you ever tried it?
No, but I think because the problem is with the ironing, you gotta go slower, and this is about speed, because you have to go back and forth and go tick 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 and go pretty much all throughout the surface fast to make sure that as it dries, it's dry.
Yeah, all those bubbles are up.
Yeah, pushing those out, with the roller.
Yeah, I've seen issues when we've had to mount prints and stuff where, you get the whole thing down, and you think you're perfect, and you take a good side look at it, and you realize that there's a big puddle or a big air pocket somewhere in that print.
Oh, the packets are the worst.
Oh, and then you have to try to get that out, which is like using
so
in and have the air escape, and then you invariably get a little crease in there.
So here's a good story. Maybe we, as we wrap it up. So here's the story. Once I had to do a show in Miami, and I had this really beautiful piece that was going for the show. So I procrastinated, let's say, and I left the mounting for the 2 days before I have to ship. Why not?
No.
And so I'm going. It's a big piece. It was bigger than my usual. I think it was like 52 by maybe 72 or something. It was big. And so I'm coming in, and I'm I've done this 1,000 times. I know how to do it. I'm doing it on the floor, huge piece. I'm rolling it. I think it looks great. I didn't look at the time. It was like around dinner time. So the family was hungry. It was a Friday. Hey, let's go eat. We're waiting for you. Blah blah. So I'm trying to rush it, and I'm like, I think I've been doing this for a while. I think it looks dry, feels good. I'm gonna go and have dinner, and I'll come back and just finish the corners. Go back, go home. We're going out to eat. It was Friday. Went to a restaurant. We came back, walk into the room. And to my horror, again, the paper and the canvas has shrunk not evenly. So I had huge packets of air, and in other parts I had wrinklage, where the paper just wrinkled, in this case because the canvas was shrinking faster, right? So it wrinkled it, even though I used heavy paper. So I was like, oh no, it was impossible to do the push pin method and try to get some of those, because by that point, almost the adhesive was already dry, so what do I do?
And do anything.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't want to call the gallery and tell them that, I ruined the paintings, so what do I do? And this plastic, it's like a thin layer, acrylic, and a heavyweight paper is like layered, right?
Yeah.
So because it was still moisture, so I started peeling on one corner, and I realized that I could peel the paper, that thin layer of thickness of paper. The other side of the paper stayed in the canvas, and because of the acrylic paint, as we talked about earlier, being this film, I was able to peel this thin layer with my entire painting, which then I was
all in one piece, or
all in one piece.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, very slowly, very methodically, like rolling it up slowly and putting it out. And I was able to then adhere it properly on another canvas, and it went perfectly fine. The painting's still around, and it was just beautiful show.
Wow. Well,
but I sweated.
I do.
I sweated like. I think what really made me do this is just I didn't want to make that phone call to the gallery and say I ruined the painting, because it was an important reason for an important show during Art Basel, so it's like
Well, that's your professional attitude, and that's you should be commended by that, about that, because it's a lot of artists, like including myself, might have just said, you know what, I've ruined it. I can't do it. I can't do it. There's no time to repair.
Yeah.
So, but you, as inquisitive as you are, you're going to find a solution. So
I sweated it. It worked.
But there are techniques, and I'm sure you can tell us about that, in another episode, or even now, how to get that perfect adherence, from paper to canvas. What are some tricks?
So here's a couple of tricks. So, which, again, should I have followed these tricks myself on that painting, that wouldn't have happened, right? But, it's Friday, you're kind of cutting corners, and I paid my own consequences of my not following my own procedures. But for larger pieces, what I do, it works better if you are able to do it on a wall, and you are able to staple the entire canvas on the wall, and gesso it on the wall, so that it has already a beautiful flatness to it before you start gluing. So your canvas must be bigger than the piece of paper. You should have at least 5-6 inches extra, because as the gesso dries on the canvas, it's going to shrink the canvas. And on the staples, it's going to be cut waves. So no, you don't want to glue there. It has to be perfect flat. If you don't have a wall, then what I recommend you, that I have done this too when I don't have a wall where I can staple, is do it on the floor and buy that thick tape, like a 2-inch painter's tape.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I'd rather use so that way your floor is not all sticky afterwards.
Yeah.
And then just do a big frame all around the piece, so it's nicely, and because on the floor you can walk over that edge, so it sticks really well. And then when I apply, so I roll the paper, and I start on one side of the canvas, putting the gel medium, and then what I'm doing also for better adhesive, on the paper itself, I take my brush and I rub it just a little bit too with the medium too. Not a heavy coat, just a slight coat, and then I apply it and work my way through from top to bottom as fast as I can, and then use the roller, the
so
rubber.
you laid it down flat.
Yeah, and then whether it's on the floor or on the wall, and then using the rubber roller like we use for printmaking, then work my way from the inside out to push all the air gaps much as possible, and do that for a couple hours until it dries. And when
I would have thought that you would. I would have thought of you as you roll it, you would be rolling it. Like
I do roll a little bit, of course.
Yeah,
but you don't have time. The problem is because you have to glue in sections, right? Like you do a section like 2 feet. So if you wait too long, then you're gonna have a wave. See,
that's why they pay you the big dollars. You know that
you're gonna have a wave. Strangely, I guess it's because of the difference in how the paper is already drying before you apply the next. So as fast as you can apply the adhesive, the better. And then the trick is in and then what I do, once it dries, let it dry completely. So usually the next day, let it sit till the next day. Take it off the wall or take it or from the floor, untape it. Draw then the box where I'm going to cut it, which has to be, I cut the paper and the canvas. So I'm cutting into usually like a 1/4 inch from the paper.
Yeah.
Cut it really nicely. I usually use scissors, those long scissors, to give me a nice cut. I guess you could use knife if you have a good surface, but or a good table, I just use scissors. And then what I do is I go all around it with I put my fingers on the gel medium, and all around the edge of the entire painting, I just kind of with my fingers, I put that medium also on the edge, so that there's no ever a separation between the two, the canvas and the. It just kind of gives it a nice finish all around.
Beautiful.
And that's it. I have paintings that are 25 years old and they're perfect condition.
Yeah, and they're rollable too.
They're
roll them to transport them to clients. Do they have to be lightly rolled, or is it a big?
Yeah, lightly rolled.
Yeah, you can't roll these and put them into a tube like that.
No. Once I sent a couple of paintings to a show, and they returned it to me in the wrong tube, which was like they were rolled like this, and like, oh my god. So fortunately, I was able to slowly in a warm roll them back up, put some books over them, and 2 days they were perfectly flat.
Yeah, interesting. I love this technique. This is a kind of an idea for more podcasts. It's like it's a DIY kind of with
DIY. Exactly. And
I really appreciate it. It was that's cool. Now you've answered the questions I need to, that I needed to address
to get
that myself. I'm just trying it just to because I'm
and that's good. We all learn from each other. I have tried some of your techniques of pouring and and than playing with the more of a liquid form. So I think it's fun. We push each other to try new ways of working. So we hope that this episode help our friends too.
Yeah, this is as I was going to say. I mean, this is really great. Not only for you and I to have this great little chat and learn from each other, but our intention really is to bring it out to everyone that is listening that can, possibly share their own things with us. And if you have an interesting technique and you have an interesting story about it, contact us, because we're always interested in talking to people that have interesting things to say. And
absolutely,
our next guest, of course, will have lots to say, and on this subject of mediums and acrylics and so forth. And you got to listen to that. But before you do that one, you have to listen to this one.
That's right. I think that's a perfect way to finish it. Thank you, Drew, for giving us a good ending to the session. Thank you to everyone listening. Please do us a big favor, send this episode to your friends. That's one way which you can get this podcast to more people, inspire more artists, become a bigger community. And one last thing, if you haven't taken our Artists on a Mission Challenge, it's totally free. Go to the artistnextlevel.com website, sign up. On the homepage, there's a banner, Artists on a Mission Challenge, where you will hear from Dr. Ana Gomez, you will hear from Drew, you hear from myself. 3 videos, come through your email, no Zoom sessions, no date to remember. It all comes through your inbox. Super easy, it's free. It's a way to say thank you to our community and giving you some tools that you can use any given time. So
wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, my friends. Thank you, Drew. We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
We will see you at the next level. Goodbye.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.